Welcome, Aging in Place viewers. We have a guest on our podcast this morning. We had a very interesting conversation before we came on. So Paul is located not in our greater Kennesaw, Atlanta area. He's a little bit north of us. So Paul, tell our viewers who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
I describe myself best as a recovering tax lawyer, but I have worked in and around estate planning for mostly the upper net worth people, but I did work for others as well. There are a lot of human dynamics that go into this, and they begin with Mark Twain's quote, which is, "You never really know someone until you share an inheritance with them."
Yeah.
But I will tell you that the absolute best estate planning results that I have ever been associated with, all to a situation, 100%, involved intergenerational discussions between the givers and the receivers. And that is counterintuitive to many who don't want to discuss it at all and damn sure don't want to tell their kids. But that's a mistake not to do either.
Let's get into, I want to know a little bit more about like what shifted in your career to pursue that? What came up that you decided to make that pivot in your career?
Well, it happened when I was 36 years old and was a cocksure estate planning lawyer who thought I knew it all. And a 93-year nonagenarian Southern Belle client named Hattie Lee Higginbotham explained it to me. And it was an aha moment that transformed my career. When I went to see her, and she was from the Virginia Lees, a Robert E. Lee descendant, and had a big antebellum plantation home. And one of her financial advisors contacted me and said, "Hey, I got this client. She's a spinster. She never married, has no kids." And he was like, "She's got $6 or $7 million under management with me. And I know I'm not alone. And I also know that she's being berated by nieces and great nieces. And she really wants to give most of her estate to charity, but she's housebound. And she's out of town. Will you go see her?" I was a sole practitioner. Of course I will. So I went there and, drove up what looked like Tara, with the double oak trees lining. And I was escorted into the house, had your classic, 22 to 25 foot ceilings in those old homes, and put in the parlor. They fetched me some cherry lemonade. And about 10 minutes later, these 20-foot double doors open, and there's a lady in a wheelchair, another lady wheeling her, and a lady to her right. I'm like, I got this. I have good bedside manner. She gets about 15 feet from me, and she says, "Sonny boy," and that's the first words out of her mouth. She says, "I've done no planning, and I'm running out of time. So I need your best advice, Sonny boy. I mean, your last best advice. The advice you'd consider so important, so critical, and so compelling that you would impart it to me on my deathbed. What's your last best advice, Sonny boy?" And it was an emperor has no clothes, and I was the emperor and realized I was naked. So I talked around for about a minute trying to come up, because, you know, most estate planners were like, well, you know, we can save you taxes. But I already knew that she probably wasn't going to pay a lot of estate taxes, because she intended to give much of her estate, which was north of 15 million ultimately, to charity.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I talked around and finally told her. I said, your estate planning decisions will impact the relationships of those who survive you. And it apparently was good enough, because I didn't get escorted back to my car to make the trek up I-10 back or down I-10 back home in the New Orleans area.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point that I realized that I didn't have a set of beliefs and philosophies about estate planning, what I stood for. And I remedied that. And the one pager is on my LinkedIn. And the article that ran in Trusts and Estates magazine about 6 years ago, called 32 Core Principles, is essentially an expanded discussion of those 32. They're on one page. And it's available on my website, paulhoodservices.com, under the books and articles tab. You can scroll down. I've got a 3-parter on the psychology, or what I call the human side of estate planning, and the 32 Core Principles article, among others. So.
Let me ask you this. So it seems to be, in what I've read and what I'm hearing a lot, is that when you give money that's not earned, it's like winning the lotto, and the people that have won the lotto, there's not a good track record with what happens to their life. So I have been around situations where all of a sudden you're at the table and the loved one passed away, and one person is expecting a lot of money and doesn't get it. And you, like you said, that relationship gets down to like, well, maybe that person didn't love me because they didn't leave me a lot of money.
Bingo, Pete. Bingo.
And I think which I want you to talk to our viewers about that is, you know, I this is my belief, nothing more than that I will give my kids skills and relationships, not money, because money does weird things to people. If you're not ready for money, money will absolutely turn you upside down. So what do you, when you're talking with people and they're saying, I want to give all my money to my family, are you kind of becoming a counselor and helping them through that mindset that may not be the best way to use that money?
Well, that's right, Pete. One of my mentors, the late, great Jerry Levan, used to say that no incredibly intricate estate planning document, will or trust, can ever equate to deferred parenting. And one of the most important things that a wealthy family can do for its new members is to discuss the importance of the wealth, the potential impact of the wealth, and then train them how to be responsible for it. Now, I'm a firm believer in putting everything, and this is for the really more of the wealthy, but it doesn't take much. I believe in putting inheritances in trust, because I'm also of the firm belief that assets are worth more in trust, particularly a trust that's exempt from seizure, than they are outside of trust. But that doesn't mean that even if the beneficiary is not a trustee, which we often, they often will become at a certain age.
Mm-hmm.
They need to know how to deal with that trustee, and
What
how
do
to
you
ask
think?
him.
Let me. I want you to talk to my viewers on this point. What stops people from pursuing a trust? I know the benefits generally, but in your work, what kind of holds them back from pursuing that? Because if you don't direct your funds, somebody else is going to direct them, and that's not going to be somebody you might enjoy having, because you build your wealth over a time. You don't want the government to just say, okay, here's where it's going. You want to direct it. So what are you seeing as the number one problem with people not embracing trust?
Well, it's actually three different occurrences of the fear of contemplating your own mortality.
Okay.
Or in the psychological jargon, mortality salience. It affects not only the client, but it also affects the client's children because of another psychological term called attachment. I think everybody understands that. You put an infant down and walk away from it, it may start crying. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That attachment, we have that our entire lives. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about that. So the kids sometimes, and I've seen this many times, where a parent wants to discuss their estate planning with me, with their children or one of their children who may be present, but is shut down by the child saying something like, "Oh, Daddy, I don't want to talk about your death. That's sick. It's a long way off. This is very premature."
Mm-hmm.
When we all know it's really not. But I said there were three, and estate planners are also subject to salience. And quite often, the estate planner is as uncomfortable discussing the client's death because it reminds the estate planner of his or her own death. Or they truncate the discussion and it's gallows humor. The funniest situation I had, Pete, I was in a meeting with a client and like 5 or 6 of his other professional advisors, including his regular lawyer. And I was brought in to help them with the estate plan part. And he kept saying, if I die this and if I die, and I said, time out. I said, unless you're Ezekiel or Elijah, you're going to die. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
And a couple of the advisors they were, I'm from Louisiana. They were backtracking like the fastest crawfish I've ever seen. And of course, they walk backwards to begin with. But the client, this is the first time I met him. And this was like 10 minutes into the meeting about this. The client looked at me and said, "You're absolutely right." And that minute, I became that client's most trusted advisor. And his lawyer had represented he and his company for over 30 years. But that answer, that transparent
So you're
truth,
saying like being truthful. I mean, we all have an expiration date. Nobody gets to escape that. But we're reluctant to believe that there is going to be a date. Do you think, this is from an outsider looking at it, is it best that the person that's setting up the trust sit down with the kids to discuss it, or decide that they're going to go the route of, let's just say, donating it all to charity? Would you recommend that they have these open discussions along the way, or is it going to be like, hey, Dad decided to give all of it to charity, and surprise, surprise, Walk our viewers through that scenario.
Certainly. The answer to your question is yes. The best estate planning results I have ever been even tangentially a part of have all 100% involved intergenerational discussions between what my old mentor Levan called the givers and the receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you, you mentioned something earlier about, did my parent love me as much? And you were right. And I said, bingo. And let me amplify that. It is without a doubt, bingo, because I had three situations that I can think of off the top of my head, and one in particular, where a child was significant, and that was my client, the child, significantly wealthier than the parents. I mean, this guy was north of 50 million. His parents died with a $200,000 estate, and he had three siblings. And in the will of the survivor, she left him $25,000 and divided the other 25 among the three other kids. So they each got about 58,000. Okay. He was in his office, his palatial office on a penthouse, in a penthouse of a building. He started crying, broke down and started crying, and asked me, did my mother and father only love me half as much?
Yeah. And that's
what a missed opportunity. Because let me finish, Pete, because this is important. Because he was upset about it, I call it the love scoreboard. Some people believe that what they get as a final grade on the love scoreboard is reflected by what they get from the estate. And what a missed opportunity, Pete. Had the parents told him that.
Yes.
Orally, or if they couldn't bring themselves to do that, and that is far better, write a letter, because you know what happened in each one of those three situations? There was cutoff.
Yeah.
Remember I said about the survivors' relationships? Yeah. Each of those people stopped talking to their siblings.
I believe it.
Over this. And it's a tragedy.
Yes.
Now, in his case, I was blessed because I asked him if I could reach out to his siblings to reconnect them. And he was reluctant at first, but he said yes. And we were able to reconcile the siblings. Now, unfortunately, one of the siblings died. So, it was two of the three. But it's like Meatloaf said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right?
Unless you're the person got left out. I mean, it's tragic because when you're describing this, the lack of communication creates generational rifts, because if the communication is not done in a proper fashion, because like you said, the fear of dying, everybody has to get over that because we're all going to die. But if we don't, and we don't communicate with the kids what our intentions are, it gets misconstrued. Like you just said, did he love me half as much as the others? And that's a terrible thing to think. I mean, he's probably thinking, well, you already have 50 million. Do you need another 50,000? No.
The money was irrelevant. The money was a proxy for love.
He takes home the fact that love was the scorecard, and money is the scorecard of the love, which is absolutely not the true, but it's two people on the different wavelengths. Which, do you sit when you're talking on a podcast or with clients, are you saying, look, we have so many bad scenarios where if we can't communicate effectively as a family, if that day comes before you're prepared, you can create a generational rift that's going to go on for generations, which
Oh
should
yeah.
scare the heck out of people.
Well, the words aunt and uncle are only used in the pejorative. And that's a tragedy. On my website, Pete, and in my email signature block, I have my mantra, which is saving the world one family at a time.
Yeah.
Now, I am not a practice. In fact, I don't even have an active law license because I had Louisiana, and Louisiana Supreme Court actually accepted my petition for retirement. But I assist and I write. I've written 9 books, and mostly what I do today is teach people who are still in the trenches of estate planning. Lawyers, CPAs, bank trust people, life insurance people, wealth management people. And then sometimes I will consult with lawyers who are dealing with challenging estate planning, family, client situations. So,
what do you? I don't know the laws. So you're in Ohio. I'm down here in Georgia. Are you restricted from doing business in Georgia because of the laws, or can you do
no, because I'm not practicing law.
Okay, so
if I was engaged in the practice of law,
okay,
it could be a problem.
You can take care of clients no matter where they are to educate them, because I think it's so important for our viewers to know what you described the pitfalls there, which I think is awesome, because I've seen firsthand, because I talk with them, I live and experience the end of life conversations. And, I was amazed at the lack of communication that was happening, because people are definitely afraid to admit that the day is going to come. It's not if, it's when. And if you can't have an open communication with your family, there's going to be miscommunication, because a person's going to misinterpret that financial, scorecard to love, because love is the number one driver of everything. So it's going to get jacked up in the communication with the family. So you can do business down here in Georgia.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I do. Yeah. Because I also do family business succession planning as a non-lawyer.
Okay.
I do a lot of work with wealth psychologists. I only, it's like I tell people, ask me what I do for a living. I say, I practice psychotherapy without a license, because that's essentially what I do.
Yeah.
But let me add this. Not only is that intergenerational discussion important with the family, but it's even more important if the client does what you want to do, which is give it all to charity. Because I have seen some horrific situations where parents left everything to charity and then named one of their kids as executor. And the kid was incensed, and they either would challenge the bequest, or I had one where the kid actually stole over $3 million because they felt entitled to it.
Right.
I call those kids waiters, waiting on their parents to die.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's the reality of what is out there. And I want you to, I'd love for you to come back, because
Happy to anytime.
There's about 50 more questions I want to ask you, but I want to be respectful of that. We talked about 20, 25 minutes. So tell our viewers, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, my email is on the screen, paul@paulhoodservices.com. My website is paulhoodservices.com. I get questions from all over the world. and I'm really good about answering them. So if people have questions, ask me. And I usually get the toughest questions, because when a lawyer hires me, they're over their head. I don't get any easy ones. So,
well,
that's it. I mean, but anytime, Pete, I'll be happy to come back.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. What would be the one thing that you want our viewers to take home from our time on this podcast that you could share with them?
Your estate planning decisions will impact the relationships of those who survive you. So choose wisely. That is on the back of my business card, which is what I told Hattie Lee Higginbotham 30 years ago, or 27 years ago.
Dang, I like that. Thank you, Paul. I want to appreciate your time for coming, because I know we talked about you getting to a location pretty quickly. So thanks so much for carving out the time for our viewers. And I want to tell our viewers, if you know of somebody that has to have those candid conversations, that is not afraid to believe that, hey, your day will come. It's not a matter of if, it's when. You got to have those open communications now, not because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So you can't say, well, I'll get to it sometime. You have to respect the fact that we don't know when that day is going to come. So keep those communication, talk it through, so you don't create those generational rifts, as I've seen out there.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen. I agree with you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Appreciate you being with us.
Glad to be here.